I recently went to Dresden and put together some images of some of my favorite places. The Altstadt, Frauenkirche, and Royal Palace Museum inside Dresden, Pillnitz and the Elbe River just outside, and Königstein and Bastei, two sites a little farther away. When I think of Dresden, of course, I think of the fire bombings of World War II. The fires burned so hot and for so long that everything crumbled. Not just steel and iron and wood and modern material, but even the stone crumbled. When I was roaming around Germany in the mid-90s, I didn't go to Dresden. There was no point. There was nothing there. Of course, there was a city there, an East German city, now reunified, part of just Germany. And there was Soviet history, East German history, modern history, but nothing from before. Even as late as the early 2000s, I remember seeing pictures of bombed out buildings still there, rubble still there. But not anymore. They've been restored. And now you can walk around this city that should have always been there, that no one that we know has really ever seen. I've certainly never seen it. But it's like it just appeared out of nowhere. Of course it didn't. It took a tremendous amount of work. But it's interesting now that you can walk around and compare burned out blackened stone with new stone side by side that they've put together, pitted iron like here on the left with the new iron on the right, everything just kind of living in harmony as if it was always there, but you can see those traces of restoration. This is the Fürstenzug, one of the very few things to survive the firebombing. It's 23,000 porcelain tiles. And because they were porcelain, they were able to withstand the heat. It's kind of remarkable. It depicts 35 electors of Saxony, the rulers of Saxony, and I will now recount every one of them for you. Just kidding. This is the eastern courtyard of the palace. This is where they did jousts. And up above, you can see the windows with small little windows that actually opened where the ladies would throw their handkerchiefs down and things like that, like you would see in the movies. That all actually took place here. One of the really cool things about Dresden was how close everything was to each other. Just in this aerial here from Google Earth, you can see the Zwinger Palace, Theaterplatz, the opera, the cathedral, the royal palace, our hotel, and Frauenkirche. The Frauenkirche is the symbol of Dresden. And up until 1994, this is what it looked like. These pictures are from about 94, 95. There was a field, there was rubble, there were stones laying there. Up on top, you can see them categorizing them. And as they tried to rebuild it up until 2005, you can see the dark stones and the light stones, how little of it survived. I mean, this is a massive church that's been there for hundreds of years, and they've painstakingly restored it, but it completely collapsed. There were 300 people in the basement of this thing. They thought they were safe, but the entire thing collapsed. You can see the photos here of just how devastated it was. The melted metal, crushed stone, everything painstakingly labeled and restored. This is Zwinger Palace, one of the first things that was restored, like in 1951 or so. But when we got there, it was torn up. All the pictures I've ever seen of this place had lush gardens inside, and it was already done. It had been restored long ago, but apparently they've started over again. This is Theaterplatz. This is the back end of Zwinger, which is actually an art gallery there. Here's a statue to one of the Saxon Johanns. I have absolutely no idea who, to be honest. And that's the Opera House. Most of the things I actually knew about Dresden were from its Eastern Bloc times, not all of this period here. So it was really kind of neat to see this mural from that period still existing on the Palace of Culture. That was kind of a neat thing to see. Hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about some of the Eastern Bloc stuff later. For me, the real surprise in Dresden was the Royal Palace and the Royal Palace Museum. Nobody had told us about this place. We hadn't read about it, didn't know hardly anything about it. And we were just lucky to be staying right across the street from it, literally steps away. And within moments of being in Dresden, we had walked around, going to go take a look, and stumbled into the Royal Palace Museum ticket office and thought, oh, okay, there's a museum right here. Later, our guide mentioned to us that she liked the display of weaponry. So we thought, okay, maybe it's a place we'll go to. But she didn't take us there. She didn't show us around. We had no idea until we walked into this place 2 hours from leaving Dresden. And we're just blown away by the exhibits. I mean, this is a world-class collection of armaments and weaponry from the 1500s. Virtually everything they had was from the 1500s. The electors and kings of Saxony. And this stuff was just staggering. Every individual piece is priceless and would be an amazing find. And there were tens of thousands of them. It just went on and on. And not just weapons, tools, implements. Those were gardening tools. These here on the right are gardening tools. Those on the left are like breaching tools, but they're intricate. And these are tools from the 1500s. And they're just staggeringly gorgeous and detailed and precise and well made. But this wasn't a museum of weapons. I mean, the museum itself is the residential palace, what they call the Versailles of Dresden. And no one's seen it because it was literally just opened about 2 years ago. No one has seen it since the end of the war. But this is a 300-year-old palace that rivals Versailles. It was gorgeous itself, but the collections inside it, like I said, weren't just weapons. There was the Green Vault, which is full of jewelry. There's a drawing and prints exhibit from the Middle Ages to today. There's a mint that has over 300,000 objects in it. There are wardrobes and costumes and ceremonial outfits and armor from about the 1500s. They have a Turkish exhibit called the Turkish Chamber, which is the finest collection of Ottoman art outside of Turkey anywhere in the world. Each one of these individual collections is world-class, probably one of the best in the world. And they have 5 or 6 or 7 of them collected in this gorgeous palace, which just opened, and that no one knows anything about. The artistic and technical mastery that they possessed back then is really impressive. I mean, looking at just some of the inlays, the mother of pearl, the machine work, some of them are so detailed. How did they make this in the 15 or 1600s? They're amazing. But the fact that they just kept going on and on and on, and there were thousands of them. It went on forever. And I hate to say it, but we didn't scratch the surface. We really only had a couple hours. And we saw, well, I don't really know how to quantify how much we missed, because you don't know what you don't know. But I know there are entire collections of things we didn't even get to, that we didn't see, that we don't know are there, that once I went back later and started looking at what this museum was and what they had, I realized, okay, yeah, I saw this and this and this, but there were so many things that we didn't even get to and didn't see. We saw a lot of the mint here. We saw a lot of coins. We saw the presses. We saw a staggering number of them. I mean, just the number of gold coins that we saw in these rooms. I mean, any one of which is unbelievably valuable, and it just kept going on forever. But the things we didn't see, we saw some jewelry, but I know that the collection was significantly larger than what we saw. Some of that would have been really cool to see. The Turkish Ottoman art, we didn't see any of it. And I'm sure it's really impressive. and would have been nice to see, but we didn't get to it. We didn't see it. And that's one of the things that I think, impresses me the most is I was so impressed with the museum, and I know there's so much I didn't see. I mean, I can go into a museum and I can do the whole thing and be in and out in an hour and see what I want to see and be perfectly happy. If the museum warrants that kind of speed, some people will linger all day. I won't. I'll go in and I'll see what I want to see and I leave. But there are other museums that I will spend day after day in, like the British Museum. Every time I go to London, I go back to the British Museum. I always spend time there. And I can spend an entire day there, even though I've been there many, many, many times. But there's just that much interesting stuff to see. This museum is like that. I would definitely go back to Dresden just to see this museum. And here, looking at these rooms, doesn't that remind you of Versailles? I mean, this is a palace. These residences just opened. Nobody has seen these until now. They literally just opened, and they're not even finished doing all the work. But they were gorgeous. I mean, it's not as large as Versailles, and it doesn't have the grounds that Versailles has because theirs are spread over. Versailles is spread over a large area, and this was right in the middle of town in Dresden. But there are other things around it that are equally as impressive as Versailles. But this palace itself had the residential quarters were every bit as nice as Versailles. And these pieces, every one of which were just priceless. To illustrate that point, I want to take just a moment to focus on one piece, one nameless piece. They didn't draw attention to it, this ivory frigate. It was made in 1620, and it's all ivory. The planks with the Saxon princes carved on it, the cannons are gold, the rivets are gold, the rigging is gold. The little figures climbing the rigging, ivory. The sails are ivory. Those sails are bone, and they look like they're billowing in the wind. The craftsmanship of just this one piece in their collection, amazing. While we were in Dresden, we got outside the town a little bit. We went to this neighborhood called Loschwitz, which was a nice suburban area, quiet, peaceful. I think even in the Eastern Bloc times, the people who lived there were pretty well off or high-ranking members of the party or something like that. But it was a really nice area, kind of on the way to Pillnitz. It was nice to see something other than just sitting. Pillnitz Palace is just up the Elbe from Dresden. And while we just spoke about the Versailles of Dresden, this is much more like Versailles in style because there are gardens. But let's be clear, it's no Versailles. It's nice, but it's just a few palaces and some nice gardens. It's a peaceful place, and it's a nice place to go visit, but it's not Versailles. The electors of Saxony would come here to relax. Basically a summer residence, a place to get away from the town, things like that. And one of the electors gave one of the palaces to his mistress. That actually burned down, and then they built another one. But it kind of became, I don't want to say a tradition, but it became a tradition that electors would give these palaces to their mistresses. The mistresses were publicly recognized and held positions. It wasn't a secret. It was something that everybody knew about. It was public. I keep mentioning these electors of Saxony. What is an elector? We think of kings, princes, things like that. We've really never heard the term elector much. An elector, you have to remember, at this time, Saxony was part of the Holy Roman Empire from around 1356 to 1806, I believe, are the dates. And as a member of the Holy Roman Emperor, there were leaders who were able to elect the Holy Roman Emperor. Those were the electors. So the leaders of these kingdoms were called prince electors. And I really know nothing about who they were, their lineage, who came after who. I have no idea. This tree is interesting. It's a Japanese camellia brought back from Japan in 1776 by a Swedish botanist to London. They also sent one to Vienna, to Hanover, and to Pillnitz. This is the only one that's survived. They have to work hard to keep it alive, though. There's a house that slides over it in the winter. From Pillnitz, we took a paddle steamer down the Elbe back to Dresden. It was a nice, relaxing cruise. This cruise, just like the trip in general, gave me a lot of time to think about Germany now and Germany then, 30 years ago when I was there just after the fall. You know, East Germany back then was really East Germany. I mean, you could just see it everywhere. It was so different than West Germany. Now, not so much. Now they're very similar. Of course, there are still discrepancies, but it's nothing like it was then. Back then, you didn't have to ask if you were in East or West. Wherever you went, you knew. You could tell. I remember being on a train in East Germany, broken down in the middle of fields in the middle of summer because we were on a Soviet engine. And I was talking to the other Germans, and they were explaining that, yeah, one Soviet engine could pull an entire train, but they break down all the time. Whereas the Western engines, they need 3 or 4 of them, but they didn't ever break down. And there we were sitting there, and we were talking, of course, about the Russians and the time that had just passed. And at that time, virtually nobody I talked to had anything good to say about their recently departed comrades. Now, obviously, it wasn't unanimous, but everybody I spoke to, anyway, it was my experience. I know the people existed, though, who didn't feel that way, because I've learned about them over the years, and I was actually fortunate enough to meet some of them on this trip, some older people who had lived through that period, who were East German through and through, who liked the socialist, communist, Soviet, Russian system. They weren't calling for reunification, didn't want to be Western. We think of everyone in Germany wanting reunification, that it was just unanimous and everybody was all for it. And it kind of seemed that way because it moved so fast and happened so fast and without any resistance. But there were people who didn't like it and didn't want it. There were few, not a lot of them, but there were leftists, diehard people who were East German through and through. They weren't calling for reunification. Actually, no East Germans were really calling for it. It's not something they even thought was possible. Until everything just snowballed and seemed to happen, no one had really thought it was going to happen. But there were people who didn't want it. Granted, they were a minority, but I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out that they existed at all. But there were people who enjoyed the system, lived well under the system. Families were high-ranking party members, and they had pretty good lives, and they kind of lost it all when everything went capitalist. We've seen that in Russia as well. When Russia collapsed and went completely capitalist overnight, everything became criminal and oligarchs, and a lot of people lost a lot of security and the chaos, and they didn't like it. Well, that happened in East Germany as well. Clearly, the country has been better for it, and virtually everybody lives much better than they did now. But it was interesting to run into some of those people that I had kind of wanted to see remnants of, and I was actually fortunate enough to meet some of them who didn't like it. They really enjoyed the Soviet system. It was interesting. And it was amazing to me to hear them, still even to this day, spout some Soviet propaganda and nonsense from the time period. I mean, these are people who had gone to study in Russia with people from all over the world and thought it was just this wonderful thing that people all over the world went to Russia to study. They were clearly being groomed. I mean, the KGB was clearly grooming these people, but they didn't realize it. They talked about how their family members from the West didn't want them in a reunification, and that they rented expensive cars to come visit them to make their lives in the West look better. For what reason? That was just Soviet propaganda. But even to this day, people still believe it. That's how pervasive propaganda is. But this area of Germany wasn't called the Valley of the Clueless for nothing. Even other East Germans called them that because they didn't get Western television, Western radio like all the other East Germans could watch Western media and knew what was going on. The people in this area didn't. And I'm not saying they were all clueless, but that's what the other East Germans even called them because they kind of bought the party line. I feel bad classifying them all that way, but that is kind of what I knew about them, and it was interesting to run into some of those people still thinking that way today. We stopped off in Königstein on the way to Dresden. It's about 20 miles away, pretty close to the Czech border. It's a really neat fortification on a plateau with big stone walls. It's an impressive fortress just because of the height. There's not a lot to see there, but it's pretty and it's neat, and it's a nice place to stop off on the drive. The neatest thing that I found out about it, though, is a lot of the architectural drawings and plans for the city of Dresden were moved here during the war, and that's one of the reasons they existed and survived, is that they were put in the basements here in Königstein, and then after the war they were able to refer to them to rebuild Dresden, years later. Bastei is another nice place just outside of Dresden to stop off. It's really pretty. It's great for hiking. This would be a great place if you're a hiker. You can walk all through these stone cliffs and mountains and rock formations. They're all basalt, I believe it is. And it was really cool to see them and just take a little break. There's a resort there, a hotel. There's some really good sausages. We had some really good sausage there and just had a nice little break, just as something different. But if you're a hiker, this would definitely be a place to come spend a day or two and do a lot of walking. It was just nice and peaceful. And of course the weather was perfect and we really enjoyed just stopping off here, even though we were only here for a very short time. It was a nice place to go, and I was really happy to have seen it. I'd never even heard of it, until right before the trip. So that's my time in and around Dresden with all its associated miscellaneous, useless ramblings. And if you actually suffered through all 23 odd minutes of this, my apologies, and I hope life improves for you.